dash. Die generously. The empire is getting old. Looking at the starry sky in the distance, the general waved his hand. Adjutant Chin seemed to understand the general's determination. He picked up the phone on the desk with a solemn expression. The other end of the phone seemed to have been waiting for a long time. He held the phone tightly and pondered for a few seconds. His heavy breathing seemed to tell the other party that a major decision was about to be announced. Adjutant Chin, what do you mean by the general? The other end asked cautiously. Adjutant Chin looked up at the general and announced the general's decision sadly. There was a long sigh of relief from the other end of the phone. He didn't speak for a while, and then the phone was hung up. General, you don't have to do this. All soldiers are willing to die to defend the general. Adjutant Chin stood up straight and almost shouted to the general. The general also hissed. Adjutant Chin, don't say any more. The soldiers are not allowed to take any action. All of them obey the orders of the new commander. After the general said that, he strode out of the door. Outside the door was a team of fully armed special forces. Each special force was equipped with the most advanced armor, and they were tightly wrapped in jet black flexible metal. Seeing the general walking out of the room and a soldier walking out of the queue, the general waved his hand, telling him to disperse and not to stop him. Looking at the determined general, the special forces present saluted the general in unison. Everyone was so excited that their arms touched their foreheads during the salute, and a frightening sound of metal collision resounded on the spot. The general paused for 2 seconds, solemnly returned the military salute, and then walked outside without looking back. Outside the building, there are more military police, not only fully armed. Dozens of war robots are surrounding them, and densely packed suspended heavy tanks appear in the sky. All weapons are ready to fire at any time. If there is a slight abnormal reaction on the scene at this moment, all fire will definitely erupt. At the same time, in order to prevent accidents, star battleship-level communication jamming devices have been erected around the square, prohibiting all communication transmissions except encrypted frequency bands. The general looked around for a week and continued walking to the square not far away. The square was already crowded with people. Millions of people poured into the square from all directions. Hundreds of thousands of people cried bitterly when they saw the general walking out of the building. Just as the general slowly walked into the square, a guillotine had already been arranged on the execution platform in the square. This guillotine was forcibly requisitioned from a collector. When the collector learned that the purpose of the guillotine was to execute the general, he regretted that he should not have collected this ominous object. After being ashamed and painful, the collector ended his life with one of his most cherished antique guns. He did not want to wait until the general died in front of him. The guillotine was already in decay, and the knives were thick and blunt without edges. The collector specially hired the best restoration experts in the empire to make the guillotine look new. The knives were also purchased from unknown metals collected by the expedition team from a distant planet 100 years ago. They have extremely high hardness and have memory functions. The collectors spent a lot of money to restore the guillotine. Jean found the Empire's smelting experts and spent more than a year researching it before completing it. Even though this seemingly clumsy guillotine had a blade so powerful that it was rumored to be able to break atoms, it was precisely because of this that in order to humiliate the general, a group of careerists from the Empire forcibly seized the guillotine and used the most barbaric execution method to shock the opponents. The general came to the execution platform and walked to the guillotine in 3 steps and 2 steps at a time. He gently touched the guillotine and looked at the shining cold blade. He knew that at the moment of his death today, he would not feel any pain. The executioner standing aside was wrapped tightly, and his eyes were just black bulletproof glass pieces. The executioner did not dare to look at the general, but he still saluted a military salute and shouted, "General." The general returned a military salute sternly, then straightened his military uniform, turned around and solemnly saluted the millions of people in the audience. This military salute was the longest salute in his life because the people in the audience were the people he was guarding, many of whom were his veterans and many relatives of sacrificed soldiers. The general shed tears. At this moment, serious commotion began in the square. Millions of people shouted for the general. The crowd began to rush towards the execution platform. The military and police officers in charge immediately turned their weapons and pointed them at the people. "Hurry up." The senior officials on the execution platform shouted to the execution platform. The crowd attacked the military and police defenses without fear, and the military police began to use light weapons to suppress them. For a while, the square was filled with the sound of electric shocks and the beating of military sticks. It seemed that with every blow, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. More and more people were injured, and the crowd was like a sea. The military police responsible for suppressing light fire could no longer support it. "Hurry up and execute." An official with a sharp mouth and monkey cheeks gave the final instructions to the executioner. "Otherwise, your whole family will be sent to a military court." The sound is extremely terrifying. The general looked at this scene and knew that if he continued to live, countless people in the audience would be injured or even killed. The general walked to the guillotine calmly and placed his head on the place where the knife fell. There was a gap here for the executioner's neck. The executioner seemed to be walking slowly to the switch that released the knife with difficult steps and placed his trembling hand on the switch. At this time, people were even more crazy than before. They wanted to save the general, and they wanted to attack the last line of defense. The general looked back at the executioner and said, "Zhang Jun, don't be sad." The executioner was suddenly startled and replied tremblingly, "How does the general know our names?" The general smiled and just said, "You are a good soldier." Then the general closed his eyes and waited for Zhang Jun to flip the switch to execute him. Suddenly, violent gunshots were heard from the audience, and the screams were louder than before. It turned out that the senior officials and elders on the trial stage had begun to panic and issued orders to repress with heavy equipment. Countless people were swallowed up by the flames and fell in a pool of blood. The general knew that if there was any further delay, more people would be killed or injured. He shouted, "Zhang Jun, do it." Zhang Jun suddenly retracted his hand and shouted, "No, I won't execute it." Zhang Jun only admired the general. Because of the general's charm, he joined the army to serve the country. If it weren't for a fierce battle, he would still be in the fighting force. Although the fierce battle was narrowly won, all his comrades died. When the general awarded him the medal, he said nothing and just hugged Zhang Jun tightly. At that moment, he burst into tears. The general roared helplessly. "At this moment, no one can save me. Take action and execute the order." Zhang Jun was heartbroken and turned to pull up the general, but the general still roared, "If he can give me orders, Zhang Jun, I will come back." Zhang Yung just turned over and his body suddenly froze there, thinking to himself, "Will the general come back?" At this moment of hesitation, a stream of warm blood came out. It turned out that the presiding judge couldn't wait any longer, so he kicked the deputy presiding judge off the stage and pulled the switch to release the knife. Zhang Jun was stunned on the spot. The general's bloody head fell from the execution platform one level at a time, with neat cuts. The general showed no pain on his face. At this moment, he had no pain. People were even more furious when they saw the tragic situation after the general was executed. People completely lost their minds at this moment. The weapons hidden by people were constantly being transported to the front. People who did not receive the weapons began to snatch the equipment of the military and police. For a while, the exhausted military and police on the scene threw away their weapons and equipment and fled. People armed themselves with these weapons, and many veterans began to form combat teams and deploy defenses, surrounding the general's body airtight. At the same time, some people lifted the general's body and retrieved his head. The surgeon arrived at the scene as quickly as possible and held back tears to sew up the general's body. Because everyone saw what Zhang Jun did, No one bothered Zhang Jun, who was in pain, and Zhang Jun stood silently beside the general, standing upright. At this time, the Special Forces team that had just bid farewell to the general in the house also broke through the suppression and came to the scene. They already knew the result, but it was still difficult to face this moment. The ironclad soldiers held back their grief and shed a few tears before starting to carry out the order issued by the general earlier. A cryogenic chamber that was completely black and non-reflective was secretly delivered, and the general's body was put in. At the same time, another cryogenic chamber was also transported, and a corpse exactly like the general was released. Then, the cryogenic chamber containing the general's body was quietly transported out of the scene without anyone noticing. Less than 5 minutes after the general's body was sent away, the sky began to darken. When people looked up, it turned out that the most powerful Imperial guards had dispatched all the heavily armored floating tanks. Seeing the scene, the captain of the Special Forces team signaled Zhang Jun to follow them, and then asked people to send a message to the back, and everyone dispersed and hid. After people got the news, they felt that this was the only way they could do it. So, the millions of people in the square began to disperse to the streets around the square, but the speed was limited due to the huge crowds. At this time, the already frightened senior officials of the Empire issued an order to bloodbath the square. The Imperial Guards were not the People's Army, but the People's Army. The cyborgs copied from the genes of the best warriors have no humanity or compassion except for being loyal to the people who control them. In order to better play their role, the Empire placed violent potions and other potions in their bodies to facilitate the control of these cyborg soldiers. The moment the order was issued, thousands of heavily armored suspended tanks sprayed out flames of death, and no one who was hit was left intact. People fled in fear, and people kept falling behind them, but they could not save them because everyone who was hit was turned into thousands of pieces. People ran angrily, and the flag of the Empire in the distance looked vicissitudes of life under the afterglow of the setting sun. The blood on the earth reflected the sky in the square red. Just as the general said, at this moment, the Empire is even more dying in the hearts of the people. Origin Chapter 2, Bloodbath, Cleanup, Youth. Night fell as scheduled, and all the Imperial guards above the square had just evacuated, but the scene was as silent as the deep space of the universe, without any sound. No, there was a sound. It was the gurgling sound of tens of thousands of people's blood flowing into the sewers. The entrances to many sewers were blocked by the corpses of the dead, and the blood that could not flow away accumulated into dams and blood puddles. Due to the previous chaos, many streetlights under the night were either destroyed and fell to the ground, or were damaged. They were flickering on and off, reflecting on the blood puddles, which was extremely terrifying. Suddenly, a rapid siren sounded, and a large number of people wearing protective clothing and clean protective clothing arrived at the square, escorted by armored vehicles of heavily armed military police. The military police armed with heavy firepower weapons secured all intersections, and technicians also set up high-power shielding devices on site to block all signals. Even high-magnification reconnaissance equipment from a distance cannot obtain any images or sounds. With the sound of rumbling locomotives, hundreds of large antimatter cleaning trucks drove into the square, followed by hundreds of large fire trucks. The antimatter cleaning trucks dispersed and sucked the flesh and blood of the victims into the garbage bin. The antimatter incinerator in the bin burned everything until even a trace of air could be emitted. The large fire truck that followed behind started to wash the streets at maximum pressure. After being cleaned, the sewer outlets on the streets were unblocked. Since the water source of the fire trucks had been filled with genetic destruction fluid and decomposition potion, the remaining blood and flesh were dissolved into the slightly turbid and viscous liquid, like newly emerged pus, flowed into the sewer. The small animals and fish feasting in the sewer, after a period of crazy sucking, screamed, twitched, and twisted, fell to the ground or floated in the water. After a while, their corpses also dissolved into the same pus flowing down the ground. Following the flow of the sewer channel, it flowed to the purification plant deeper underground. The high-efficiency treatment on the ground quickly showed results. Almost no traces of blood or minced meat could be seen at all. They were followed closely by the cleaners, who carried a miniature conventional incineration device. The handheld part of the device was a cleaning head with an adsorption function. At the same time, every place being cleaned was a higher concentration of decomposition potion will be sprayed at the same time. Thousands of people will be divided into 4 directions from the center of the square, with 4 rows in front and back in each direction. After the commander gives the order, 4 rows of cleaners in each direction will start a carpet-like and more detailed cleaning work to ensure that the traces of death in the square are completely removed. At the same time, the intelligent robots of the engineering force are already repairing damage everywhere, including nearby buildings and shell holes. Due to the special construction materials of the planet, all the buildings are made of metal structures. The robots only need to call up the engineering drawings of the repaired areas. After a quick scan, they can use laser equipment to quickly repair. Under the rapid work of the robots, the repair work is progressing smoothly. As time passes, the square is slowly returning to its original state. The last step of cleaning is to replace all the trash cans and some sculptures in the square. A trash can near the Imperial Monument suddenly shook, rolled to the ground with a clang, and spun around a few times. Cleaners and military police who were alerted by the sudden noise quickly surrounded it. An officer stepped forward and kicked open the lid of the trash can. It fell, and a boy of about 18 or 19 years old crawled out. His body was soaked with blood, and he looked around with a look of horror. The fear and cold made him tremble. His trembling lips were black and purple. Everything from yesterday to now made him extremely scared. At this moment, he was completely at a loss. The cleaners were at a loss when faced with this scene. Everyone was stunned on the spot. The officer who just kicked open the lid picked up the communicator in his hand and reported to his superiors and asked for instructions. A moment later, after receiving the instructions from his superiors, the officer asked an old policeman behind him to handcuff the teenager. When leaving, the officer whispered a few words into the old policeman's ear and then waved his hand to signal them to leave quickly. After hearing this, the old policeman was stunned for 2 seconds, with a trace of disbelief and fear in his eyes, but he knew that the matter was irreversible. If he did not carry out the order, he and his family would suffer. The old policeman wanted to shake his head helplessly, but in an instant he realized that he must not show mercy and sympathy to these opponents at this moment. Otherwise, the consequences of disobedience may be more serious. The young man was pushed away by the old policeman in fear. He may have guessed his fate in his heart, which made him even more panicked. His walking posture slowly began to become abnormally strange. The old policeman saw it in his eyes and ignored it. After leaving the team for some distance, the young man was pushed away by the old policeman. The old policeman finally couldn't help but ask the boy to stop and asked, "What's wrong with you? You're walking so strangely." The young man turned back tremblingly, tears falling from his eyes, and answered the policeman with sobs. "Uncle, please let me go. I don't dare to do it anymore. My parents are still waiting to go home, and I have to go back to school. I pooped my pants. I don't want to die. I don't want to die." With a thud, the young man fell to his knees and banged his forehead on the ground. Every sound was clear and loud, accompanied by the young man's pleading voice. "Uncle, I was wrong. I was wrong. I will change it in the future. I will not resist the government. I will be loyal to the emperor for the rest of my life. I don't dare anymore. I miss my mother, 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 mother." The young man became more and more sad and frightened, fearing that his next fate would be death. In the past dozen hours, he had witnessed the tragic death of nearly 200,000 people. Although he temporarily avoided the fire of the guards by hiding in the trash can, the actions of the cleaners one night completely broke him down, so that fear, hunger, and lack of physical strength made him finally unable to bear it anymore, and he fainted in the trash can and was discovered. When the old policeman saw this scene, he burst into tears. He also admired the general. In his early years, due to chance, he was not assigned to a military camp directly under the general's jurisdiction. However, in the subsequent wars against the invasion of the planet BZ, he was sent to the general's army as a defense team member and was directly led by the general. Looking back, it was the most glorious time in his life. Recalling all this, the old policeman closed his eyes in pain. Soon, he opened his eyes, which were extremely bright. It seemed that he had made an important decision just a moment ago. The old policeman helped the young man up, wiped away his tears, and unlocked his handcuffs. Faced with this sudden change, the young man stopped crying in surprise. After the old policeman stabilized the young man, he said slowly, "My child, that's right. They want me to execute you and then throw you into the antimatter incinerator so that you completely disappear from this world. Your parents, relatives, and friends will never be able to find you again." After hearing this, tears welled up in the young man's eyes again. He did not cry out. He knew that the old policeman's current attitude was that he would not carry out the order. He continued to listen to the old policeman saying, "My child, I can't do it. I want to let you go. Then you must stay away from these right and wrong forever. Don't mention everything you saw again. Otherwise, our family will suffer disaster. Can you do it?" The young man wiped away his tears and nodded heavily several times. At this time, the old policeman took out a police dagger from the tool bag on his waist. The young man didn't know what was going on and subconsciously took a step back. The old policeman shouted softly, "Don't panic, listen to me. Although I can let you go, the officer asked me to keep one of your ears to reply that the mission is completed. My child, you still have to suffer a little." After hearing this, the young man covered his ears with both hands. This was a difficult decision, but the young man weighed it quickly. He let go of one of his hands, while the other hand still covered the other ear. The old policeman glanced at the dagger, glanced at the young man's ear, gently pinched the young man's ear with one hand, and then said, "Grist your teeth, close your eyes, I'm going to do it." The young man gritted his teeth, closed his eyes tightly, and allowed the old policeman to start. The old policeman aimed at the ear, took the knife, and slashed it down quickly, accurately, and firmly. The young man's ear was cut off, and a stream of blood came out of the young man's ear hole. Then there was a thumping sound. Before the boy opened his eyes, he not only felt blood flowing from the side, but also seemed to have a stream of warm liquid and soft things sliding down his entire face. The boy endured the pain and opened his eyes, only to find that his eyes were covered with blood. The boy quickly wiped the blood red on his face with his sleeves, but found that the old policeman was not in front of him. Not far away, there were several fully armed soldiers behind the officer. The boy lowered his head and found that the old policeman was found to have fallen to the ground. His head was half exploded by the bullet, like a watermelon that had been hammered open by a big hammer. The white brains were dripping on the ground. Looking at his sleeves, there were also mushy white brains and blood on the sleeves. The young man felt something hot coming out of his throat, and a stream of filth spat on the old policeman's body. The young man just felt like the world was spinning. He couldn't hold it anymore, but the officer seemed to be playing with him. He laughed a few times and left the scene with a wave of his hand and several soldiers. The young man's life was not spared. Several cleaners followed and quickly disposed of the old policeman's body. At the same time, they stripped the young man naked and cleaned him with normal water. The cleaners, they only had glue on them, so they used glue to directly cover the boy's wound to stop the bleeding. As for the ear, the cleaners threw away all the processors, then threw him an oversized black garbage bag, indicating that he should put on the garbage bag to cover up his shame and then leave here quickly, otherwise the officer would come back later and kill him. The young man used up his last bit of strength and stumbled into a small street beside the square. With the support of the wall of the small street, the young man continued to run for a short distance while holding onto the wall and finally fell in front of a butcher shop. Perhaps hearing the noise, The door of the butcher shop opened a small crack. After confirming that it was only the boy, the owner of the butcher shop quickly came out and took the boy back into the shop. The officer was carried away for a moment, but he never thought that his move would actually leave the most important spark for the demise of the empire and the end of the executioners and accomplices a few years later. This is a later story. The square had been completely cleaned at this time, and all traces had been completely restored to its original state with the help of the cleaners. It was even more beautiful and tidy. The cleaners evacuated the square as quickly as possible. In the distance, floating tourist buses from other places arrived at the reception area of the square carrying excited tourists one after another. The tour guides waved the holographic billboards in their hands and led the tourists to start the tour procedures. The tourists happily looked at the majestic square outside through the huge glass curtain wall of the reception area, making bursts of tut-tisk sounds. They were proud of having such a mighty empire and happy life, and sincerely praised the empire for a better tomorrow. The flag of the empire is about to be raised, and tourists are urging the tour guide to speed up the process. They want to shed tears of gratitude at the moment when the flag of the empire is slowly raised. Origin Chapter 3, Zaku the Butcher. The butcher began to close his shop the day before yesterday after he noticed that the crowd was much larger than before. Many regular customers came to buy meat and only did simple and quick transactions through the small window in front of the door. And when the tragedy happened in the square, the butcher didn't open the door, even though people who didn't know him were running and running, banging on the door, shouting and pleading. The butcher's name is Zaku. He was born on colonial planet number 3, which is less than 300 million kilometers away. It is a very primitive vegetation planet. The diameter of the planet is more than twice that of the Empire's central planet, and it has reached 500,000 kilometers around the Empire's central planet. Planet number 3 does not have an official name in the Empire. The people on this planet call it the Green Source Star. The planet is full of big trees and mountain lakes, and there are billions of biospheres. The footprints of the official imperial scientific research on the colony planet number 3 are only within a radius of 50,000 kilometers around the mining area. Going further away, the Empire's Ministry of Science and Technology is not very interested in it at the moment. Interesting, after all, the galaxy where the Empire is located is a vibrant one. The Empire's interstellar colonization plan has already set foot on dozens of planets that are not only suitable for human survival, but also contain rich or raw materials. Even those planets with harsh living conditions, through the protection of giant sky screens, allow humans to survive, colonize, build, and mine thousands of planets. Therefore, the wider scientific investigation of the number 3 colonial planet Luyuan star does not appear to be an urgent matter. The mining area covers an area of less than 10,000 square kilometers, and the protective measures of the Empire's Ministry of Colonization and Construction are only about 1,000 kilometers away from the mining area. Going further away is an uncontrollable restricted area. The Imperial Colonial Administration strictly prohibits humans from setting foot in restricted areas under any name, nor are they allowed to enter or leave the restricted area without authorization. Violators will be imprisoned in heavy industry and enter the most dangerous frontier work in the mining area. Personal freedom is also restricted, and all imperial benefits and status privileges are canceled. More importantly, between the restricted lines of the restricted area, the mechanical warriors will judge and execute the people on their own. Outside the restricted area, life or death depends on fate. Because the planet contains a large amount of special crew, or the ore is a mysterious magnetic source that can emit forces and driving forces that are repellent to the current gravity after being stimulated by different levels of energy. The Empire has also vigorously developed levitation technology after discovering and applying crew ore. The extremely large reserves of crew ore have also made levitation equipment popular in the homes of ordinary people, comprehensively changing the transportation methods of the entire Empire. After the continuous efforts and experiments of several generations of scientists from the Imperial Department of Science and Technology, The Empire has developed warships that can expedition to the entire galaxy. It is said that the superlight Starleap technology is also being tested. It is reported that the experimental spacecraft has brought back creatures from low-level civilizations billions of light years away. There are extremely primitive creatures living in many unexplored areas, and there are many mysterious creatures with rudimentary intelligence. These mysterious creatures not only have super learning abilities, but some also have spiritual power and can even change forms. These creatures are very cute. Many people raise such creatures in the huge interstellar colony planets of the entire Empire, except for the earliest few that were accidentally captured by the Ministry of Science and Technology during exploration and were bred and taken away by powerful people. The rest are almost all smuggled. Due to the special nature of the crew, or one side of the green source star always faces the sun, and the other side is a more mysterious world. It is said that these creatures came out of the darkness for their ancestors and never went back. Zaku the Butcher has followed his father and several uncles since he was a child, leading a team to drive a suspended spacecraft to travel and hunt on colonial planet number 3 in order to capture these creatures and other popular goods, and then resell them at a high price to make a profit. But hunting is an extremely dangerous thing. At the same time, the species outside the restricted area are not only docile pets, but also more ferocious beasts and birds of prey. During the years of hunting, Zaku not only possessed superior outdoor survival ability, but also learned how to fight tenaciously and deploy in battles with ferocious beasts and birds. He also learned more about the secrets of Liyuan Star and mastered some mysterious abilities. At the same time, it also accumulated a lot of money for them. Later, Zaku's father was surrounded by several raptors during a raptor attack. In the end, he was defeated and was picked up by the raptors and taken into the dark place, where he disappeared. The uncles who were grieving felt that they had lost the leadership of Zaku's father and felt that they were no longer interesting. After some discussion, everyone divided the wealth equally and cherished each other. Some returned home, and some left Liyuan Star to go elsewhere. Zaku wanted to go into the Dark Land to save his father or take revenge, but due to the disbandment of his uncles, Zaku was powerless and had to give up. When Zaku was 5 years old, one day, his father suddenly informed him of the news of his mother's death. Before he could react, he took him into a small floating assault ship without even letting him bring his belongings or a photo of his mother. That's it. He boarded the battleship inexplicably and grew up in the battleship. He gradually forgot the original appearance of his family and did not know where his family was. He only knew that not long after he left the mining area, his father received several huge sums of money. That was because his father sold all the valuable things in the family. Zaku thought for a long time, and he didn't know where he should go. After drinking several times alone in the battleship, he contacted the biological dealer who he had cooperated with for a long time and sold the battleship half to half to the biological dealer. Then he entrusted the biological dealer to buy him a small luxury interstellar shuttle yacht, and after purchasing a large amount of food supplies and biochemical robots, he began his interstellar wandering in drunken dreams. After floating in the universe for almost 2 years, Zaku felt more and more bored. Facing the dark universe all day long, the twinkling romantic stars now disgusted him to the extreme. After standing in a daze facing the starry sky for a long time, he inexplicably walked into the room where his father's relics were kept. For the first time, he really got to know his father. Although his father gave him almost doting care and almost devilish training when he was growing up, he never really understood his father. He only knew that his father was very powerful and knowledgeable, and he was a top talent in commanding operations and fighting, as well as in all aspects of science and technology. His father also worked hard to train him, so that to this day, Zaku is actually a very powerful warrior. Thinking of this, Zaku has taken the greatest interest in his father. He opened the notepad that his father always kept hidden in his desk and called up the operation interface. The background of the interface was a photo of himself when he was a child. At the bottom of the screen, there was a prompt that genetic identification was required. Zaka subconsciously put his finger in front of the screen, and the screen showed several beams of light surrounding Zaka's fingers. In an instant, the interface unfolded, and there were only 3 folders on the screen. One was for photos and video records, and the other was for daily affairs records. The last folder said, "My son Jagu personally opened it." Zaka clicked on the folder, and there were a large number of files in it. The titles were information about various banks. Zaka clicked on a few randomly and found that they contained a large number of financial and property records and related notes. Just the contents displayed in these files were enough to make Zaka rich. Zaka slid the screen, and as he went down, there were more related files. At the last position, a video file appeared, and Zaka clicked on it. The video showed his father's neatly dressed appearance, with quite a military temperament. There was a hint of tenderness in his serious expression, and he slowly said to the screen, "My dearest child, Zaka, this is a video I reserved for my funeral. Yes, when you see this video, I should be gone no matter what the reason is, because what I reserved in the notepad is my vital sign sensor. After the notepad can no longer receive my vital sign information for a period of time, your gene unlocking will be automatically turned on. Otherwise, kid, you will never want to see any content in the notepad." In the video, Zaka's father showed a rare smile and teased his son. He continued, "But no matter what, don't be sad when I leave. Everyone will leave in various ways in life. Some leave for a while, but some leave for a lifetime. If I knew that my strong son would be lost due to grief, then I would be very sad. I leave you this video. There are some things I need to explain clearly to you." Jagu's father said seriously again, "I believe you have also seen the information about a large amount of wealth in it. If all are calculated together, this is an astronomical amount of money. You can squander these funds at will within a reasonable range. Dad will not feel bad. But next, listen up. Your mother did not die. She and other members of our family left Liyuan Star and hid in the most dangerous place in the turbulent area of the galaxy, where it was extremely cold and bitter. You must be wondering, why did they leave us and hide? That's because of your grandpa and grandpa. The 2 of them are highly respected ministers of the Empire. They once assisted 3 emperors. The first emperor was the emperor of the empire, while the second emperor maintained its prosperity and development. By the time of the third emperor, traitors were in power and deceived the emperor. The emperor was also extremely stupid. Your 2 ancestors were strong and upright throughout their lives, and they never made mistakes. They governed the country and developed smoothly. However, they hindered the behavior of traitorous ministers at every turn. In addition, they were already old, and later more and more traitors entered the court and formed a powerful alliance. Ordinary officials could not help them and supported them as termites and wild wolves. They had been coerced and lured by their leader and his party members many times, but they always believed that the emperor's intentions were true and constantly used the above-mentioned references to impeach the traitors and their party members in the court.